Am I the a-hole for ghosting my cheating wife after finding out she called me a loser and hooked up with the one man I hated the most? Hey Reddit, I'll try to keep this as organized as I can, but I need to vent because my life has gone completely off the rails. For some context, my wife, or maybe soon to be ex-wife, and I have been married for 5 years. We've known each other for almost a decade, and up until recently, I genuinely thought she was my best friend. I thought we were in this life thing together, that we had the kind of relationship that could weather any storm. Boy, was I wrong. To paint the picture, I'm not exactly a flashy guy. I work a stable but unexciting job in IT. It pays the bills, gives us a comfortable life, and lets me have a little time for hobbies like gaming and tinkering with gadgets. I've always been a homebody, which is something my wife initially said she loved about me. She's more outgoing, the kind of person who lights up a room. I used to think we balanced each other out. I provided the stability, and she brought the spark. The cracks started showing about a year ago. She started going out more, meeting up with old friends, attending work events, and just generally spending less time at home. I didn't think much of it at first. I trusted her completely. If she said she was grabbing drinks with coworkers or going to a friend's house, I believed her. I figured she needed space to blow off steam, especially since my idea of a fun Friday night is playing a co-op game and ordering pizza. But then, there were the little things. She started getting more secretive with her phone. If I walked into the room, she'd lock it quickly. She started dressing up more often, even for casual outings. I asked her about it once, and she just said she wanted to feel good about herself. I didn't press her, because who doesn't want to look nice? Then came the nights she didn't come home. At first, she had excuses: working late, staying over at her friend's place because it was too late to drive back, and so on. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in my gut started screaming at me that something wasn't right. Fast forward to about 2 months ago. My best friend, Mark, called me out of the blue and asked if we could grab a drink. Mark isn't the type to randomly call for hangouts, so I knew something was up. We met at our usual spot, and after some awkward small talk, he just came out with it. He told me he'd seen my wife at a bar with someone else. At first, I thought, okay, maybe she was just with a coworker or friend. But Mark made it clear this wasn't a casual hangout. They were sitting close, laughing in that overly flirtatious way, and at one point, the guy even kissed her neck. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. But here's the kicker: Mark told me the guy she was with was none other than Jake, a guy I've hated since college. Jake is the kind of guy who thinks he's God's gift to women. He's arrogant, manipulative, and has always tried to one-up me in every possible way. Back in college, he even tried to hook up with a girl I was dating at the time. Needless to say, he's the last person I'd want anywhere near my wife. When I confronted her about it, she denied everything at first. She said Mark must have been mistaken, that I was being paranoid. But then I started noticing more red flags. Her late nights became more frequent. She was always on edge, snapping at me for little things, and our sex life had completely dried up. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. What I found made me physically sick. There were texts between her and Jake, messages that left no doubt about what was going on. They'd been meeting up for months, sneaking around behind my back. But what really broke me was one particular conversation where she called me a boring loser who didn't have the guts to leave his comfort zone. She laughed about how predictable I was, how easy it was to keep me in the dark. And then Jake chimed in, saying something like, "Don't worry, babe, he'll never find out. Guys like him never do." I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. I just shut down. For days, I went through the motions of life while my brain replayed everything I'd read. I kept asking myself how I could have missed the signs, how someone I loved and trusted could betray me like this. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, but every time I looked at her, all I felt was cold, empty rage. So, I did the only thing I could think of: I ghosted her. I packed a bag, left a note that simply said "I know," and walked out the door. I stayed at a friend's place for the first few nights and eventually moved into a short-term rental. I didn't answer her calls or texts. I blocked her on social media. I wanted nothing to do with her. At first, it felt empowering, like I was finally taking control of my life. But then the guilt started creeping in. Friends and family began reaching out, asking what happened, why I'd left. My wife told them I'd abandoned her without explanation, that I was going through some sort of midlife crisis. Some people took her side, saying it was cruel of me to just up and leave without trying to work things out. Others said I was justified, especially once they heard the full story. Now, here I am, trying to figure out what's next. I've filed for divorce, but part of me still wonders if I overreacted by ghosting her instead of confronting her properly. I can't stop replaying the texts in my head, especially the part where she called me a loser. It's like her words are stuck on a loop, tearing me down every time I start to feel like I'm moving forward. I keep asking myself if I should have handled things differently. Should I have confronted her face to face, demanded an explanation, or even tried counseling? Or was ghosting her the only way to preserve whatever shred of dignity I had left? So, Reddit, am I the a-hole? Update. Hey Reddit, I wasn't expecting my post to blow up the way it did. First, thank you to everyone who commented, messaged, and shared their thoughts. The overwhelming support really helped me feel less alone in all of this. Reading your perspectives made me realize just how deep in denial I'd been about my marriage and my wife's behavior. A lot of you asked if I'd heard from my wife since I left. The short answer is yes. She's been blowing up my phone with calls, texts, and voicemails. At first, they were frantic begging me to come home, saying she didn't know what was going on, and demanding an explanation. Then, when she realized I wasn't responding, the tone shifted. She started accusing me of being immature, saying I was overreacting and that she deserved a chance to explain herself. I'll admit, there were moments I almost called her back. The guilt was eating at me. I kept thinking about how abruptly I left and whether I should have given her the opportunity to say her piece. But then I remembered those texts, especially the ones where she and Jake mocked me, and any lingering doubts vanished. She had already shown me exactly who she was, and I wasn't about to give her another chance to manipulate me. I also found out through mutual friends that she's been telling people I left her for no reason. Apparently, she's playing the victim card, crying about how she has no idea why her husband abandoned her. I haven't corrected the narrative yet, mostly because I'm not ready to deal with the fallout. But I'm keeping screenshots of her texts with Jake as insurance in case I need to clear my name. In the meantime, I've been focusing on myself. I started going to the gym again, something I haven't done since we got married. It feels good to channel all this anger and frustration into something productive. I also started seeing a therapist, which has been a game changer. She's helping me unpack not just the betrayal but also the underlying insecurities that made me ignore the red flags for so long. I'm still living in the short-term rental and working on finalizing the divorce. My lawyer has been amazing and reassured me that ghosting her won't hurt my case. As much as I hate the idea of dragging this out, I know it's the only way to truly move on. Another update. It's been a few weeks since my last update, and a lot has happened. First, I finally decided to confront my wife not for closure but because I needed to tie up loose ends. We met at a neutral location, and I made sure to bring a friend along for support. She showed up looking disheveled, like she hadn't been sleeping or eating much. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but then I reminded myself why we were there. She started off by playing the victim again, saying she was blindsided by my departure and that I owed her an explanation. I let her talk for a bit, but as soon as she started blaming me for the state of our marriage, I shut her down. I told her I knew everything, about Jake, the texts, and the lies. Her face went pale, and for the first time, she looked genuinely scared. She tried to deny it at first, but when I mentioned specific messages, she broke down and admitted to the affair. She claimed it was a mistake, that she'd been feeling neglected and unappreciated, and Jake was just there to fill the void. She insisted it didn't mean anything and begged me to give her another chance. Hearing her excuses made me realize how little respect she had for me. I told her that blaming me for her choices was pathetic and that she needed to take responsibility for her actions. I made it clear there was no chance of reconciliation and that the divorce was happening whether she liked it or not. She cried, begged, and even tried to grab my hand, but I walked away without looking back. After that conversation, I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in months, I didn't feel angry or betrayed. I just felt done. She wasn't the person I thought she was, and holding on to the idea of her was only holding me back. I also found out some interesting news about Jake. Apparently, he's been seeing multiple women behind my wife's back, and she wasn't even his main relationship. The irony isn't lost on me, and while I don't feel sorry for her, I hope this serves as a wake-up call for her to change her ways. Final update. Well, Reddit, it's been a few months since everything went down, and I think this will be my last update. The divorce is finalized, and I've officially moved into a new apartment. It's small but cozy, and for the first time in a long time, it feels like my space. I've started decorating it the way I want, filling it with things that make me happy instead of trying to cater to someone else's tastes. My ex-wife reached out one last time after the divorce papers were signed. She sent a long email apologizing for everything she did and saying she hoped we could someday be friends. I didn't respond. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone back into your life, and I have no interest in rekindling any kind of relationship with her. She made her choices, and I've made mine. As for Jake, well, karma caught up to him. Word got out about his womanizing, and he's been ostracized by a lot of the social circles he used to frequent. Last I heard, he lost his job due to some shady business practices, but honestly, I couldn't care less. He's not my problem anymore. On a personal level, I'm doing better than I ever thought I would. Therapy has been a lifesaver, helping me rebuild my confidence and figure out who I'm outside of the marriage. I've reconnected with old friends, picked up new hobbies, and even started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but it feels good to be reminded that not all relationships are toxic. One of the biggest lessons I've learned through this ordeal is the importance of boundaries and self-respect. I spent so much of my marriage trying to please someone who didn't appreciate me, and I refuse to make that mistake again. I've realized that being alone is better than being with someone who makes you feel small. It's also given me a new perspective on the importance of trusting your instincts. My gut was telling me something was wrong for a long time, and I wish I'd listened to it sooner. But now that I've learned to trust myself again, I feel stronger and more aware of what I deserve. I've also made peace with the fact that not all relationships are meant to last. There were times when I doubted myself, wondering if I could have done something differently, or if I could have saved the marriage. But now I understand that sometimes, things just don't work out. That doesn't make me a failure, it makes me human. I've learned to stop beating myself up over things that were out of my control, and I'm no longer defined by the mistakes of the past. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, I want to say this: it gets better. It's hard, messy, and painful, but walking away from a toxic situation is one of the bravest things you can do. Trust yourself, lean on the people who love you, and don't be afraid to put yourself first. And remember, it's okay to feel lost and broken for a while. That's how you heal and come out stronger on the other side.